Hello and welcome to another SHM movie breakdown and review, and in this particular review we are breaking down a 2014 movie by the name of Transendence. And even if you haven't personally seen this film, you've probably heard of it, and probably in a negative sense, because a lot of people who haven't seen the film have still heard people talking about it, reviewers, people in general, and most of the opinions about the film are less than stellar, to say the least. Now, the film is a directorial debut, interestingly enough, from cinematographer Wally Pfister, and the executive producer of the film is Christopher Nolan. And it has a pretty stellar cast. Johnny Depp, Morgan Freeman, Rebecca Hall, Kate Mara, Cillian Murphy, Cole Hauser, and Paul Bettany. So not a weak cast by any means. The film, though, did not do very well, either financially or critically. It only just surpassed its budget of $100 million at the box office, making $103 million, and the majority of the reviews given to the film aren't that great, to say the least. Me personally, however, I think this film is severely underappreciated and severely misunderstood. I can understand the reasons for the most part why people consider this to not be a particularly good movie, but the issue that I take with those opinions are that most of them aren't based on fact. They're based on what people are told to think by movie critics. This film is popular to hate. People love to hate Transcendence, and if you ask them why they don't like the film, they will often say very similar things. Things that they've heard other people say before, like, oh, Johnny Depp's acting as an artificial intelligence is weak. He phoned it in. Or the story isn't that interesting or that new or that unique. Or the ending didn't really pay off the movie that well. Well, I completely disagree with all of those things, because this is not your typical action, thriller, epic, futuristic, robot war kind of movie. That's just not the point of it. This is a very emotional film, and people don't realise that. Especially the ending, which of course I won't spoil. But the film is severely misconstrued and undervalued. Johnny Depp's performance as the artificial intelligence portion of the film is criticised for being emotionless. Well, I hate to break it to you, but he's a robot. So of course he's emotionless. People praise the HAL 9000 robot from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and yet at the same time they hypocritically criticise Johnny Depp's performance in this movie. Whereas if you actually remove the ominous red light and backing music from the HAL 9000, he doesn't show any more emotion than Johnny Depp does. People just like to think that HAL does show more. The actual fact is, he simply doesn't. People love to hate on Johnny Depp's current performances, and although I'm not necessarily saying that this is an Oscar-worthy film, certainly not, credit where it's due. It is not a bad movie. It's just popular not to like, as some movies, unfortunately, turn out to be. Now, the story itself is simple in its overarching plot, but the way it presents that typical story of a dangerously powerful entity or robot of some kind is refreshingly unique, because it doesn't just present it from the all-out action epic point of view, which movies like I, Robot and the like, such as Terminator, tend to go for, more of the action side of things. This movie is more about the emotional side of things. And I think that's why a lot of people don't appreciate it. They have wrong expectations about the film. This is a very emotional film. It's one of the most emotional endings I've seen from a film in recent years. But in order to feel the emotion of the ending, you have to think about the film. And that's another issue with most of today's audiences. They don't like to think for themselves anymore. They like to be spoon-fed, which is why films like Transformers make so much money, and films like Transcendence, which require more thought and individual opinion, tend to be criticised. Now, that's just my opinion, of course, and now let's get down to the breakdown of the film. First of all, the story and plot. This has been criticised by some. I can't completely understand why, to be honest, because the story isn't overly complex to understand and plays out exactly as I wanted it to. So overall, I'm going to give the story and plot of Transendence a 7. It's not the most amazing story ever, of course, but it held my attention exactly as I wanted it to. So I'm giving it a 7. It's certainly better than many other films I've seen in recent years, but not necessarily the best film ever made, of course. As far as the characters and their motivations, I'm also going to give the film a 7, because I think Johnny Depp's performance as an artificial intelligence is exactly what it needed to be. Just because he doesn't show emotion doesn't mean he doesn't have it. And that's another thing which the ending of the film, without spoiling it, clearly does and shows to prove many of those naysayers simply wrong. So for the characters and their motivations, not just Johnny Depp's, but primarily, funnily enough, everyone else in the film, is very good. So I'm going to give it a 7. As far as the visuals and effects of the film, it's a good-looking film. Most of the scenery is relatively desolate in the latter part of the film. In the earlier sections of the film, it's predominantly room-based, people talking in rooms, hallways, that kind of thing. And as I said, it's not your typical action epic, so there aren't big set pieces and huge explosions for the majority of the film. Overall, though, the special effects that are used are pretty good. Of course, the majority of them are CGI, but nonetheless, they look good, and the overall look of the film is understated, and I like that. So overall, I'm going to give the visuals and overall effects of the film an 8. Not the best I've ever seen by any means, but certainly better than many others. As far as the audio and music, I didn't personally find the audio and music that memorable. Unless you've just watched the film, you probably won't remember the soundtrack that much. But in a film like this, the music does what it needs to when it needs to. There are certain films which naturally lend themselves towards having big scores and having the music itself be a character in the film. Films such as The Hateful Eight or 2001: A Space Odyssey. This isn't that kind of film. It's not about the music. The music does what it needs to, which is complement the moment. And as such, the music doesn't stand out too much. It's an ambient, emotional boost, which is exactly what it should be. So, I'm going to give the music and overall sound of the film a 6 out of 10. Finally, for the rewatchability and entertainment factor, which as always is the most personal and subjective to me, I'm going to give the film a 7. Because although I am for the most part singing its praises, it's not necessarily the kind of film that I'd want to watch over and over again immediately after each rewatch, or necessarily the kind of film that I'd want to watch every day or every week. But every time I do watch Transendence, I enjoy it, especially the latter half of the film, and I think that it is a severely underappreciated and definitely misunderstood film. Overall, the tabulated score for Transendence is a pretty respectable 3.5 out of 5. Not necessarily the highest of scores, but I wouldn't have expected it to be. And my overall verdict for the film is, if you haven't got around to seeing Transendence, I would definitely recommend that you give it a try. If you've heard bad reviews about it, try to put those aside and have your own opinion. It's very easy to be told what to think by critics, and I don't try to tell people what to think. I simply tell people what I think about the movie. Make your own decision. Don't let critics tell you what a good film is. You decide that for yourself, because at the end of the day, any film is about entertainment. So go into the film, if you get the chance, or watch it on Blu-ray or DVD, and form your own opinion. Because I think that this film is severely underappreciated, completely misunderstood, and is one of the best sci-fi films of recent years. A lot of people disagree with that, but that's my opinion. So, overall, that is my breakdown and review for the 2014 movie Transendence, and I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.